Dagda Eve, August Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and I am here with the amazing and awesome Orlagh Costello to talk about the teaching that she provides with the Irish Pagan School. So before we dive into that, though, I just want to remind you all that we do have a new guide available. It is a free download. You can just grab it there, and it categorizes and breaks down all of the content we have in the Irish Pagan School so that you can take a bit more of a control and go through a checklist of the classes, the order of the classes, helps kind of groups them together into certain themes that will allow you to focus your learning instead of just being lost in the whole catalog of content that we have available. But speaking of the content we have available, it is specifically about a multi-week course that we have taught by the awesome Orlagh Costello here about Brigid in Ireland. So the purpose really is to go through a series of lectures in your own time at your own pace that allow you to kind of get a better kind of understanding of Brigid. But I think really we need to go to Orla and say, how does the multi-week course itself assist a person's practice with Brigid?
Good question. Giving myself a few seconds to talk. I suppose, look, there's a couple of different things. One is that there are 5 different sessions. The first one is a basic introduction to Brigid. And yeah, like it's probably, if you're investing in a 5-week course, it might be a revision of stuff you already know, but it's very much focused on Irish Brigid, who is slightly different from the other Brigids that are around the world. We then spend a week each with the goddess of poetry, the goddess of healing, and the goddess of smithcraft. And then the final session is, what about Brigid in the world today, in the modern world? Because it's all very well and good looking at our ancient lore, but practically speaking, and Brigid is an extremely practical deity, we have to be able to live in the modern world as well. And a lot of the stuff that even the Brehon laws and our old manuscripts and all the rest of it that they talk about just would not be acceptable in the world today. Like we don't tend to put a price on people's lives. We don't tend to assume that a woman's word is worth half a man's. You know, there's a lot of things there that have changed and that we need to consider when we're looking at working with the deity in the modern world.
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned the multiple different aspects of Brigid, and I know Brigid often gets lumped into a multi-deity triplicate in some way, shape, or form. Do you think these multiple aspects in some way inform that, or probably just asking a hard question, is Brigid a part of a triple deity?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Look, she's a liminal deity, right? She crosses boundaries. She doesn't worry too much about fitting into people's boxes or molds or anything else. She crossed from paganism into Christianity. So we've got Saint Brigid, we've got Brigid, and we've got the triple deity Brigid. Now, when I say triple deity, we do mean the triple deity of poetry, smithcraft, and healing. We don't mean the other type of triple deity. I just wrote a blog post on that last week, which outlined my opinions on it fairly straightforwardly, I think.
Yeah.
But whether she
And
is
that
one or
blog post is, sorry, that blog post, just to make sure I'm getting that connected. And for anyone interested to find those blog posts, you need to go to brigidsforge.com, where you'll be able to engage with Orla's blog post and some other forms of teaching too. But back to the multiple aspects of Brigid, that's kind of core of deepening and understanding with Brigid.
It is a little bit. So look, it's the time of year when she tends to get very popular because Imbolc is coming up. And well, she's popular anyway, to be fair, but people get a more heavy interest, I guess, in her. And a lot of the time she's kind of proclaimed as this deity of light, illumination, all the rest of it. But what people forget is that, like, you don't need light and illumination unless there's darkness there. So, for example, if I just throw up a slide, I'm just going to share my screen for a second now, and I'm showing you some stuff that is straight from the class on Brigid the Smith.
Awesome.
Right? And this is about the smith and magic, right? And like what people forget is that smiths created weapons of creation and destruction, right? So you have plowshares, axes, and swords are the 3 I've picked there, and that's because they kind of show a mix of creation and destruction. So plowshares are there to plow the land, to help prepare it for growing things, to feed the community, all that sort of thing. Axes can be used in both war and peace, different types of axes. axis. You wouldn't want to use a war axe to chop down a tree and vice versa. But if you're stuck, they'll do the job.
Mm.
So it can be used to chop down trees to heat or to build or to whatever, but it can also be used to kill people. Swords are primarily for show and for killing people. So we do have this mix of war and fertility. And I've got this down here, not like our Brigid at all, right? Because by the time we come around to the Smith, we're on the 4th week. So people are getting used to the two different aspects of her.
Mm.
And it's, if you think about, like the different forces at work within a community,
Mhm.
Brigid kind of is linked to quite a lot of them. And for me, when I'm talking about the Smith, I do divide it into creation and destruction, because if you're talking about growing and expanding and creating more space in ancient Ireland, it means that you are chopping down trees and creating fields out of it. You are trying to plough land that is probably very rocky and stony. You know, tree trunks and tree roots do not make the best land for ploughing.
Yeah.
Not that I've personal experience of this, but I remember my grandfather swearing about it, and he never swore. So it's hard work, but like
Yeah.
you need a bit of creation with it, but also then you have to be able to defend your land, or possibly even go take your land from someone else, and that's where the war and the war axes and the swords come from.
Mhm.
And all of that is created in the forge. We followers of Brigid have a saying about being put on the anvil, and that's where she's literally beating the shit out of you to put you into the shape that she wants. And we
Yeah.
explored that aspect a little bit more as well,
Yeah.
because there's more to Brigid. There's a deeper foundation there than you would get from a lot of the stuff that you see, that you're
Mhm,
just
mhm.
reading articles on the internet.
Yeah.
And devoting this time to actually explore, well, okay, what does creation and destruction mean to me?
Yeah.
Like what does this apply to in my life, and where do I put this in? Like, what do I actually need to create and destroy?
Mhm.
Because people have this image of destruction being necessarily bad, but it's not. A lot of change comes from destruction.
Yeah, it's all about cycles, and
Yeah.
it is about like the energy of destruction becomes the energy of creation, becomes the energy of destruction. Like it
Mm,
is about how we work with those energies, and I think that is a really, or well, actually, here's the follow-up question. Oh well, I suppose that's what I'm picking up from you, just your description, having been through this course with you, myself in the time frames, that cyclical flow of energy, that creation destruction, that is the forge. That is like right into the core of where we burn the coals, we burn the wood to release the energy to create the fire. We then use the fire to take the heat, to then the heat to change the ores, to smelt them,
yeah.
to break them, to melt them down in the crucibles, and then take them out and put them where they need to be hammered on the anvil. So the imagery of that, I think, for getting to know the Irish goddess Brigid, you really need to include that in the aspect. You see so much out there about focusing only on the healing aspects of Brigid, or focusing only on the poetry aspects of Brigid. But when you include the Brigid of the Forge, that's when you really get a very interesting and more expansive view, in my opinion, of this goddess. Having been raised, I went to a primary school, Saint Brigid's, named after the saint. I was told all the stories about how she was an amazing, awesome, kind of saintly woman, throwing her cloak down and it turning into a couple of acres worth of land so she could take it to build her own church. Like all of these kind of stories about her. But it was only when later on I began to explore the real, well, not real, because they are all real. Sorry, not
Mm.
to kind of um make a mess
But
of
there are
that.
there are there are darker stories about her. Like if
Yeah.
you look at them, I mean, she goes to heal two lepers, and that she says, okay, and this isn't the wording they use, but leper A wash leper B, and he does, and leper B is healed, and then she says leper B wash leper A, but he refuses to do so because he doesn't want to contract leprosy again. So she loses her temper, says fuck you anyway, takes the leprosy from leper A and gives it to leper B. Like, it's not necessarily darker, but it's certainly a less childlike view of the saint.
Yeah.
And there are definitely elements of the forge in there. There's also the bit where she keeps on giving away food, and we're meant to take from it, wasn't she wonderful? She gave away food to the poor and the needy and all the rest of it. But then if you think about it, whoever was trying to manage that household was trying to feed people. And like, you go into the dairy and none of the butter is there. Now, look, at in other countries, right, running out of butter might not be the end of the world. In this country, if there's no butter in the house, that's apocalypse time. right? I mean, I'm not joking, right? You need butter in the house for all sorts of reasons. Like it's a serious loss, you know.
Yeah.
There's many jokes made about, you know, the Irish only started using bread as a means to get butter to our mouths, and it's not entirely untrue.
Yeah.
But like,
The origins of butter predates the origins of bread in our country.
yes.
Like, you know, people were making dairy products from cows before they were actually making vast arrays of grain product. And you know, as a little side note about butter, regardless of she influences and all the rest of it, I almost didn't make it through my first visit to Laura from Laura when we started dating to my home because there was no real butter in that fridge.
I
So
mean, people have been murdered for less, John. Seriously.
yeah, but I think it's an interesting aspect to that, and it's this idea of the abundance and the prosperity and what those kind of things mean that still links with Brigid, and it's her almost distributing the prosperity as she sees fit. And
Yeah.
again, the judgment, if you're going to be working in the forge, handling heavy weapons or tools or fire, your judgment has got to be spot on. One
It
too
does.
many blows of the hammer, it'll shatter. You know, too long in the fire, it'll burn. Not long enough, it won't. Like, you know, there's so much that has to be managed and considered and weighed constantly in that environment. And that to me does come true in connecting and going deeper with Brigid through a course like this.
It does. And I mean, I'm going to flick down through a couple of slides here, right? Because where have I got it? There is a guided meditation on everything as well, which does help. But like, if you see here, right, these hardening colors, okay, and the
Mm-hmm.
temperatures are there in centigrade and Fahrenheit. The Smiths were craftsmen, right? They were very, very skilled craftsmen, and women, to be fair, although women were a lot fewer and still are in engineering. So if you are a woman and want to go and be an engineer, Brigid's a great deity to follow through on. But anyway, um, if you look at the colors here, right, when you're looking at burning, you can tell pretty clearly and pretty easily what temperature the fire is at just purely by the color of the flame.
Mm.
Now, what you get in old smithing kind of instructions is go to this color flame, and they don't necessarily know that that's an 570 or a 380 or whatever it is, but like they know that that's the color you need to get the outcome you want,
Yeah,
you know. And like, so when I say that the Smiths reach a lot more than just smithery in the modern world, there's science there, there's engineering there, there's all sorts of different things there.
mm.
So, you know, people wouldn't necessarily link Brigid to science,
Yeah.
but when you think about it practically, there's a very strong link there. You know, you have to use science in the forge,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
because even beyond the heating and the cooling and all the rest of it, you have vats of oil and water there, right? And if you let the sword into the wrong one, or the bit of metal into the wrong one, the metal is ruined. If you tip the wrong one over, your entire forge has gone up in flames.
Yeah,
And worse, once the water cask bursts, the flame is going to spread. So there's all sorts of different reasons why, you know, diving deeper into the different aspects will bring you to another understanding of who she is and what she is.
absolutely. And like you have it listed there, the Smith and magic. Like there is a magic involved with all of this. And when you're working as Irish pagans, or any kind of pagan, really, we believe that there is this magical energetic movement that happens and occurs. And being able to focus those magical energies or those energetic intentions through the different aspects of working with a goddess like Brigid, can really take a very practical shift in how you work and use your energetic intention. So there's that kind of saying like magic is just science we don't understand yet. So, you know,
Mm,
Smith magic, we now have more information. We can analyze these temperatures. We can understand what these are, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there is still some magic of being able to look into the fire and know when it's time to heat or when it's time to lift. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, being able to kind of deal with Brigid in that aspect is very, very awesome in my opinion. And to go back to your comment earlier on, I have known many followers of Brigid who describe themselves as either being in the crucible or being on the anvil,
Yes.
because she is a no nonsense deity, but invariably people who choose to work with her and that she accepts and works with them have core elements that may need to be refined, but usually when they come out very tempered and some of the most hardest and awesome individuals to get to know, much like the awesome Orla. So in this aspect, like, would you say that you connect with Bridget most commonly in this aspect as an engineer?
As an engineer, yes. There's other parts of my life where I would connect with the other aspects of Bridget, and I would never say that you have to connect with just one aspect of Bridget. You
Hmm.
know, I think it changes according to what you're doing and what you need and all the rest of it. So like I've got a quiz out on the website as well to say what aspect of Bridget do you need help from today, and that's a kind of a recognition that people there are three aspects. You can work with one, two, or three of them. I firmly believe there are times when we all need help from all three of them, you know. And by ignoring one or two of them, I don't think you're getting the best out of the relationship. Now, look, this is my opinion, right? People could be perfectly happy just working with one, and you do tend to find people feel more comfortable with one,
Mm.
but that they'll reach out to the others because there is an element of overlap, you know.
Yeah,
If I just flip over here, because
yeah.
oh God.
Carry on. And I think that's one of the great things about this multi-week course, being able to kind of go through and be aware of the multiple different aspects of Bridget, being able to kind of have the information that then empowers the person when they come to those moments.
That's what
Because
I wanted.
sometimes it's difficult to approach a deity when you're not sure, like, can you, should you, does this fall within their wheelhouse? So people may, just by a lack of awareness, just
Hmm.
pigeonhole her into healing or pigeonhole her into poetry. So a great course like what you teach with us at the Irish Pagan School helps kind of expand that perspective, helps kind of like take that broader view, and through that, it's deepening that connection with Brigid.
And I
So,
mean, I will say I've flicked over onto the healing one here for a second because people don't often associate the holy fire with healing, right? Because we have a tendency to relate holy wells with healing.
mm,
But like we do have a history of sweat houses in this country, you know, the steam ones.
yeah,
That would be helpful for people in a cold climate with lots of colds. You know, a good steam helps clear out the nose and things. We've also got a history of kind of burning herbs and things like that, smoking out places, smoking out kind of vapors, I suppose they would have been called, or whatever else, to try and help with the health. But
mm,
even if you come down to like a fever is burning away something, you know, like we don't necessarily get when you get a fever, it's an indication that something else is wrong, as opposed to the fever itself is the problem. Now, the fever itself can be a problem, but it's not normally the root cause.
yeah,
It's usually the body fighting something off. So the notion of holy fire or fire is healing can be really strange to people, but actually it's used a lot
hmm,
all over the world, but in Ireland in particular. I'd be more familiar with the Irish practices, obviously,
yeah, of
you know,
course.
and like if you think about it, for a nation, and we have joked about this many times, that is so wet that, you know, water is very abundant around here. We panic if it doesn't rain for 3 days in a row. um Using fire as healing is kind of interesting, you know. It's a different way of looking at things, and we have loads of holy wells, and they are usually hugely important and hugely powerful in terms of what they can cure. But the tradition of holy fire has seeped out a lot of the common knowledge, I guess. And I
Mm,
suppose part of it would be, as we move more into modern times, not everybody has a fire lit in the house every day. Or if you
yeah,
do, it's a gas fire, which you shouldn't really be burning things on, just as an aside, you know.
yeah. Take it from the engineer.
Just
not
yeah,
not
don't
designed for burning stuff.
don't go throwing herbs on your gas fire, all right? It'll block up the flues. You will end up with a gas leak. It's just not worth it, all
Yeah.
right? And
Um,
radiators don't do so well with it either, just as an aside.
that's fair. But going to like talking about the energy and the intent, there are like, and touching on that, modern pagans, not everyone has access to fire. Like, not
Mhm.
many people can light a fire or even light a candle, safely or securely. So, are those people kind of disconnected from this aspect?
Not in the slightest. Electric candles are wonderful, wonderful things. You can get battery powered candles that are fantastic. If you can't access that, I like for me, a lit candle or a lit fire is it warms something inside me, something kind of physical that is comfort and home and hearth and
Mm,
healing and everything all at once. But like if you're in a position where a fire isn't safe, then don't light a fire. You know, we there are other ways to, I suppose, symbolize that. You you can have a picture or a drawing. You know, you
Yeah.
can have those channels you get on YouTube or something at Christmas where they have the log fire flickering away.
Yeah.
They're apparently available all year round. We just don't bother looking for them for the rest of the year, you know. So you could use
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. So my,
um
my favorite one of those is a 10 hour long loop of the end of Return of the Jedi, and it's just Anakin or Darth Vader on the pyre.
I, I
With
I
with
don't
the
usually
fire
go for that
crackling
one.
noises and stuff. Well, that's just my nerdistry. But absolutely, I totally agree with you. It is about the energy and the intent, and we touch on
Yes.
like magical practice and magical being defined by energy moving in line with one's intent. And so if someone doesn't, or it's not safe for them to have like fire or open fire or lit candles or anything like that at all, yeah, something that gives the same intent or the same energy
hmm
resonance can definitely work as well. I agree. Yeah.
So we're jumping back to the forge a little bit here, but the number
Mhm.
one rule in any forge, in any engineering situation, is safety first, right? If it categorically is not safe or easy for you to have a fire in a place, then don't bloody well have the fire, right? Bridget is not someone to ask you to imperil an entire family just for the sake of a ritual, right? Like that, she might ask you to imperil yourself at other times, but that'll be after a long time, and she'll know you're able to do it. You're just looking at her going, "You want me to do what exactly?" But like when it comes down to things like fire, it's not just yourself you're affecting. It's the people around you, it's the land around you, it's the creatures around you. And if something is not safe, then do not do it. There are other ways to do it.
Yeah,
There's
of course.
always another way to do it.
And it does loop back to that Brigid being a very practical deity.
Yeah.
It is about if it works, it works, and that can be enough.
Yes.
So yeah. So we see then you have the healing waters and healing fire. Like, so do you want to talk then about her as in the healing aspect?
I will do a little bit. So look, I'll bring you into what this means for us today because bluntly, we're not all doctors, right?
Yeah.
And when we look at energetical healing, quite a lot of the kind of formal energetical healings we have in Ireland are things like Reiki or reflexology that I have put there Eastern influences, east of Ireland anyway. We're talking around Japan, China, India, that sort of area is where most of those energetical healing come from. But we actually do have our own traditions of Banfasa, right? We have faith healing in this country. Now, if you look at Dukas, an awful lot of the faith healers would have been Christian, but the land has been predominantly Catholic for what, 15 or 16 centuries now,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like it's been a while since there's been
It's
a
been a
predominantly
while.
pagan culture here.
And we're
um
working on that. We're like
we're
with the Irish Pagan School, we're working on that.
We are, but like, we also have energetical practices around the land.
Mm,
Most farmers, up until extremely recently, would have done their bounds and grounds on a regular basis. They would have used home cures for their animals.
yeah.
I mean, I remember my granddad used to, he was known as a great man for the horses, but he also used to put poultices together for sheep and cattle as were needed. And depending on the severity of the injury, there was always poaching involved.
Mm,
There was usually bread mash of some description. And if it was a really bad injury or something he was really worried about, he'd add some blood in, you know, whether it was his own blood or the owner of the animal's blood, dependent. But like for the really tough stuff, he'd add some blood in. There's also the healing the land. I mean, I think any country in the world can say they've had a history of bloodshed at this point.
yeah.
I am most familiar with the Irish bloodshed, but like, using land that has been used for killing and then changing it over to use for growing is a method of healing.
Mhm,
It's really, really important. And then we do have a tradition of Banfasa in this country. Now, there is Farfasa as well. It kind of means wise woman, fortune teller. Biddy Early was probably the most famous of them in recent centuries,
yeah.
you know. Um, recent centuries, Jesus. But anyway, um, there were men who did this as well, but
Mhm,
the most predominant stories are about women. They had a kind of a bit of a strange position in the community, in that they were, highly respected, but there was times when that respect was tinged with a healthy link of fear. They could be possibly be a link to the local she or the
mm,
local other crowd. They had an awful lot of herbal knowledge, folk cures, that side of things, but they were also used for kind of counseling purposes and advice purposes.
yeah.
And whether that was common sense or whether it was learned wisdom passed down through the generations is kind of up to the person involved, really, but like you're looking at people who were definitely figures in the community and who would have been known, but who maybe not always spoken about publicly as to what they could do. When someone had a problem, you'd maybe say you might want to call up to Mrs. O'Loughlin there and see what she can do for you. And no
Yeah.
mention was made any further of it, kind of thing,
Oh, absolutely. Actually, Laura and I had a very interesting conversation, very similar to that recently enough. We were getting a guy in to assess felling a tree for us.
Mm.
And, he's then talking about, yeah, I can do this. This is the quote. These are the machines. And then he said something which kind of tilted the conversations like, and what I do is I like to take a moment to make sure that I return the energy of the tree to the land.
Mm.
And straight away, Laura and I both had this, yeah, we're talking to our own kind.
Yeah.
Which then led to an hour and a half worth of a conversation with a guy we'd never met before, and him listing out, well, there's this guy over here, there's this person down here. If you're looking for this, you want to be talking to. And so, like, he actually he has built the knowledge in the community of all of the people, and he had some guy come up to him, like drive across. If he had a guy drive across a field to find him because he was sent to him, knowing him, not knowing him out of anywhere, because he
Yeah.
knew the right guy to go and talk to.
Yes.
So like this is a very real and living culture of like different types of skill in healing that exists within it. And so how do you think that links all back to Brigid though?
So if you're looking at Brigid and healing, she's we most clearly associated with the healing wells, but it never actually says that she was just healing people. you
Mm,
know she is like Brigid the healer, Brigid, the woman of healing or of leechcraft. And like a lot of this is um what needs to be healed. Like it's not necessarily a person's body, it can be a person's mind. It's not necessarily a person, it might be a family, it might be a
mm,
relationship, it could be a tree that needs to be healed, it could be a home that needs to be healed, it could be the land that needs to be healed. Like there's, again, trying to put Bridget in a box that says she is a human healer. She's not going to stay there too long, and she'll prove it to you that she is more than that fairly vividly, if
yeah.
if you want to go down that road. And so all of this to me links back to Bridget because it's all linked to healing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think the modern world, we have a need. We have a need for the forge. We have a need for the tempering. We have a need for the creation and destruction. But when you've gone through that creative destruction cycle, all throughout that, you need the healing process as well.
Yeah.
Because when something has been destroyed, something will need to be healed before you can begin creation again. And when something has been created, it's not always easy and pain-free. You may need healing after creation as well. Just think about childbirth. You
Mm,
know,
mm,
I mean, I've not gone through it myself, but like I've seen some of my friends afterwards, and they need healing.
yeah.
Uh, so we just need to think about this in a way that Bridget is here for us. She's been here for on this island in particular, but all over the world, because she has spread, and she will support us. She will do her best for us, but we have to do the work as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to get clear on what that healing is, what's needed, and move on from there.
That's very fair. So I suppose at this point we just maybe just touch on your own personal experience with Bridget. Like, how did you come to Bridget? Like, what moved you to a deeper connection with Bridget to then lead to creation of this course?
Well, look, I'm Irish, right? We grew up with Bridget. She's one of our three patron saints. She's the only native born, homegrown, that stayed with us patron saint, because St. Patrick was an immigrant and St. Columcille was kicked out of the country because of a disagreement of some description.
Yeah.
So Bridget is the one that stayed with us. Bridget is the one that's been here through the generations. It's not for nothing that a lot of Irish women in America were referred to as the biddy, because
Mm,
that's a short term for Bridget, and there was an awful lot of Irish women called Bridget over the years. So, she's always been there. She's always been in the background. Like, we learned about her in school. We made the Bridget's crosses, all of that. Um, but what really happened to me in an adult life, we had moved. I remember going through this weekend. It was kind of like a women empowerment weekend in
mm,
England, and I was sitting in my hotel room in Holyhead waiting for the train or the bloody boat back. God, you can't get a train over water, Orla. Um, well, you can, but there's usually a bridge involved. um, I was waiting for the boat to come in the morning, and I was staying overnight in Holyhead, and I just started bawling my eyes out crying, and I just wept and wept and wept. And I came, like, it ended up, I realized it was the Dagda that came to me. And it was that big hug, and the way he can be, and he's all comforting, and he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, get it out of your system. You need to get it out of your system. No, you really need to get it out of your system now. and, and I'm like, didn't fully realize it at the time, but when I came back then, and I started feeling that connection, I started feeling my roots in this land, and I started feeling them leading to places like Kildare and the Scanner, where there are wells. I started reading, I started learning, I started meeting other people who kind of had a similar bent,
Mm,
a similar leaning. And eventually, a few things happened. I had a couple of mental health issues over the years, and every time I just took a step closer and a step closer. And each time looking back, it seems like those were my periods when she was like hammering me, as
mm,
opposed to just being in the fire. And those are cycles that go on and go on. And it's very hard to kind of note a particular moment where she said, okay, that's it, like,
mm,
I've never dedicated myself to her. I've never felt the need to do that.
yeah.
She's just there.
Yeah. And so the her presence ongoing kind of in your daily basis, like, does it inform your daily practices? How many of your daily practices are specifically Brigid affiliated, do you think then?
um, I usually find an excuse to light a candle most days. There's usually some element of that sort of thing. I work as an engineer. I strongly feel her support in that. I strongly feel her support in the teaching element. She's very keen that people should. She doesn't. Okay, this is going to be kind of hard to explain. She's not overly pushed about rules unless someone breaks a rule, doesn't know they're breaking it, or doesn't know why it's a rule, if that makes sense. So, like, if you know there's a rule there, and you're breaking a rule, and you understand why the rule is there, and you figured it just doesn't apply in this situation, or you've got a thinking about it, that's fine. But if you don't know the right way to do things, and you end up doing the wrong thing, she gets a bit upset about that, because it's lack of knowledge that has pushed that through. And
Mm,
so that's kind of the approach that I try and take with my own team here as well. It's like, okay, you knew you were meant to do this, you did this, why? What happened? And you find out, and you can usually figure out that there's a really good reason for it,
yeah.
you know. So in that kind of way, she informs a lot.
Okay, so it's show me your reasoning and your working, and like then we can carry on the conversation. That's almost that scientific method. Like, she's not going to come
Yeah,
down and say you didn't follow X, Y, and Z in that specific order, as long as you got the safe and secure right result at the end.
yeah.
So do you think then that connection to knowledge is the bard aspect or the poet aspect of Bridget, or do you think maybe that's something someone should take the course to find out? What do you think?
I think you should really take the course to find out. But I will
Yeah,
also say that if you look at a lot of the forge, a lot of the healing, you need knowledge as well.
yeah,
You don't want to start feeding people herbs willy-nilly. You don't want to go into a forge without knowing what you're doing,
yeah,
so there's knowledge importance. But I will say that teaching is definitely an element of the poet. And yeah, you should
yeah.
go take the course to find out more about
So
it.
I suppose I was a bit cheeky in asking that question in advance, but really to kind of wrap it all off and close it, like, um, in what is the best way for you to, like, okay, you're inviting people to take this 5 week investment course with you,
Hmm.
um and with the teaching that you provided in the school, they get to kind of engage with it themselves. Like, the curriculums will just become available. They can watch the video, they can do the meditations, they can engage in the Irish Pagan School community spaces to get, like, the live support or feedbacks from the community as they need to. But what, like, how would you, what would you say to someone, I guess, to define what this course is for them, or, like, inviting someone into this, what is the value for them?
I suppose for me, it gives you a chance and a space to explore what and who Bridget is. It gives you a chance to deepen your understanding of the different elements that kind of make up this
Mm,
being that we call Bridget. Um, and it gives you the chance to work through what the lore says, what our practices say, what our folk practices say, and how this particular pagan Catholic develops those into the modern world. You know, it gives you thinking, it gives you thought points. And it's not necessarily that I will provide you easy answers. A lot of the answers are quite difficult and lead to more questions, but at least they'll lead you to the questions that would at least end up with you understanding you and your relationship with Brigid a lot more and knowing where you want to take it as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much, Orla, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a really fantastic insight into that 5-week course at the Irish Pagan School called Brigid in Ireland. And yeah, thank you again, Orla. It's always a delight getting to chat with you and to kind of share in this process as we go through being Irish pagans in our modern country as we are. And I would say to all of you who have seen this video, thank you very much for spending the time with us. Thank you for investing your effort and energy with the intent to be around us on this. Hopefully it's been interesting for you. Hopefully it's been insightful for you. You've learned something to go away from it, a bit more information about Brigid for yourself. And if you feel inclined to, if you feel that you want to take that connection deeper, the multi-week course is available for you there to pursue if you feel called to do so. If not, we do have that free download available down the bottom. It is a very well laid out, categorized guide through all of the content available at the Irish Pagan School, including checklists for those of us who like to tick the box when we do the thing. I'm a big fan of that. I love kind of ticking stuff off as like, yes, I have achieved. The serotonin hit for that is quite good. So it is something that helps kind of give structure and pathway. So do feel free to go down and pick up that. I encourage everyone to go and pick up that free resource there as well. And until the next time, look after yourself, take care, and salon. Goodbye.
Slán.